There is a specific kind of silence that Marines describe when they talk about these encounters, not the tactical silence of a patrol going quiet, not the natural silence of deep forest at 3 in the morning. Something else. A pressure. A stillness that feels less like the absence of sound and more like something holding its breath. These are not civilians. These are not people prone to exaggeration or fantasy. These are men who have spent months in the Helmand Valley, who have walked point through Taliban ambush corridors, who have been trained to identify and neutralize threats under conditions that would break most people entirely. And when they describe what they encountered in those woods, the shape, the movement, the impossible speed, they use the same word independently across dozens of accounts. Wrong. They say it felt wrong. And here is what makes those accounts impossible to dismiss. The specific details match, not the broad strokes, the specific ones, the pallor, the proportions that are almost human but not quite. The way it moves on all fours but doesn't move like anything that should be moving on all fours. If these were isolated stories told by isolated people, you could write them off. But trained observers with years of combat experience, describing the same geometry of wrongness in locations thousands of miles apart, that is a different category of problem. By the end of this, you're going to understand what the military has documented, what the psychology of trained perception tells us about why these accounts are credible, and why the wilderness that covers 63% of American landmass may harbor something that has been here far longer than we have. If you just felt that shift, the one where you realize this isn't going where you expected, hit the like. That means this channel is doing something most military content doesn't bother with. Let's start with the first documented cluster, Camp Lejeune, Eastern North Carolina, 1994. 3 Marines conducting a nighttime land navigation exercise approximately 4 miles into the Onslow Beach training corridor report a visual contact at approximately 30 meters. The figure is described in their after-action statement, yes, there is a written record, as bipedal, pale or white in coloration, and moving at a speed inconsistent with any known animal in the region. One Marine estimates the height at 6 to 6.5 feet, another puts the limb proportions as elongated, the third, the only one with a clear, unobstructed sightline, states that it turned and looked at them, not toward them, at them. A distinction that every combat veteran understands immediately and that civilians almost never do. There is a difference between an animal registering your presence and a thinking thing looking at you. The eye contact, the pause, the assessment. These are predatory behaviors that trained soldiers recognize on a cellular level because their survival has depended on recognizing them. What this Marine described was not an animal reacting, it was something evaluating. The report was filed, it was reviewed. The 3 Marines were cleared for duty the following week, but the encounter was not investigated further. One detail from that night that did not make it into the formal statement, but appears in a personal account given years later by one of the 3 Marines. They were running white phosphor night vision at the time of contact. The figure was not a heat signature. It did not show on thermal. It was visible through the tubes with a clarity that the Marine described as wrong in the same way the movement was wrong. Too sharp, too defined, as if whatever it was either did not generate heat or had learned not to. That detail matters. Hold it. This brings us to the first thing you need to understand. The military does not ignore what it cannot explain. It buries it in bureaucracy. There is no sinister conspiracy here, no men in black, no classified cover-up operation. And the mechanism is simpler and more human than that. When a combat effective unit files a report describing an encounter with an unknown entity in a training corridor, the institutional response is almost always the same. The incident gets logged, gets reviewed, gets attributed to fatigue or stress or misidentification and gets filed in a way that ensures no one has to think about it again. This is not malice. It is self-preservation. An organization cannot function if it takes seriously every experience that falls outside its operational framework. So the framework expands to accommodate the experience and then closes over it. The men who filed those reports knew what they saw. The institution knew what the institution could afford to know. These are not the same thing. Save this video. The pattern you just heard, how institutions absorb and neutralize reports they can't categorize, comes up in every single cluster of military encounters with unknown phenomena. You'll want this framework the next time someone tells you if it were real, the military would know. The North Carolina accounts are not singular. Fort Lewis, Washington, 2003. A small unit on a perimeter security exercise in the Cascade foothills describes a figure watching them from a tree line for approximately 40 minutes. The duty logs from that night note an unidentified visual contact, non-hostile behavior, species unknown. The entry is followed the next morning by a notation that the contact was attributed to a black bear. Or there are no black bears in that specific area of the foothills that weigh what the duty sergeant described. There are no black bears that stand upright at the tree line and watch a group of armed men with apparent patience and apparent interest. The unit was running thermal that night. The figure produced no heat signature. The duty sergeant noted this in his initial log entry. The notation does not appear in the morning revision. Fort Hood, Texas, 2008. A range safety officer conducting a post-exercise sweep of a heavily wooded sector in the southwest quadrant reports, in a statement given to his commanding officer, that he observed two pale figures moving through dense brush at a speed he could only describe as impossible for the terrain. Both figures, he states, were moving on all fours. Both had heads that were, and this is his language, not an interpretation, too large for their bodies. The report was returned to him with a handwritten note recommending he speak with the unit's medical officer about sleep cycles. He was not sleeping. He was also not on night vision. He saw them with naked eyes at dusk, which means whatever the thermal and infrared absence indicates about how these things move through the electromagnetic spectrum, it does not mean they are invisible to unaided human perception under the right conditions. It means something more specific and more difficult. They appear to exercise a choice about when to be seen. Notice the pattern. Not the creature descriptions, those vary. The pattern is what happens after. The reports are not destroyed, they are not classified, they are redirected. Every soldier who has filed one of these reports describes the same institutional mechanics: an initial review, a plausible alternative explanation, a quiet return to normal operations, and an unspoken agreement that this is not a thing that is discussed. At this point, you might think you understand where this is going. Military men encountering large, unknown animals in isolated training environments, probably undocumented megafauna, probably misidentified wildlife, probably stress and darkness doing what stress and darkness do to human perception. That is the comfortable conclusion, and it would hold if not for the third detail that keeps appearing across these accounts. The one that has nothing to do with size or pallor or speed, and everything to do with behavior. They communicate, not with each other. With the people who encounter them. Multiple accounts, separated by years, by geography, by unit type, describe a moment in the encounter when the figure produces a sound, not an animal sound, a vocalization that several Marines have independently described using the same unsettling phrase. It sounded like something that had heard human speech and was trying to produce it without understanding what the individual sounds meant, a mimicry without comprehension, a performance of language by something that has learned the shape of it but not the interior. This is the detail that keeps sleep researchers and behavioral biologists who have informally reviewed these accounts from applying the standard misidentification framework. One, because the mimicry response, using approximated human vocalization to manipulate the behavior of a human target, is not a known behavior in any documented North American species. The accounts in this video come from a collection of nearly 40 first-hand testimonies gathered over an 18-year period, cross-referencing the location, the unit type, the terrain, the behavioral details, and the institutional response across those accounts produces a pattern that is difficult to attribute to coincidence and impossible to explain through the framework that keeps getting applied to it. We are about halfway through what these accounts reveal. What comes next? The specific geography, the indigenous accounts that predate military presence by centuries. And the one detail that combat veterans consistently describe as the most disturbing part of the encounter is the piece that makes everything before it suddenly makes sense. Stay with this. The geography is not random. When you map the clusters of military encounter reports against US training installation locations, a specific pattern emerges. The encounters do not happen everywhere. They cluster in 3 distinct terrain types: dense temperate forest above 2,000 feet elevation, wetland transition zones adjacent to old-growth timber, and, most consistently, land that carries specific designations in indigenous geographic records. This is not mysticism, this is cartography. The Anishinaabe have documented the Wendigo for centuries. The Cherokee records of the Ukthen describe a creature with pale or white coloration, 2 elongated limbs, and a specific behavioral characteristic. It hunts by mimicking human sounds to draw prey toward it. The Algonquin accounts of the Weshuge describe something that moves between human and non-human form and is most dangerous not when it is seen, but in the moment immediately after it chooses to be seen. Multiple native scholars have noted that many US military installations are located on land that these traditions specifically designated as inhabited, not haunted in the modern supernatural sense, but genuinely occupied by something that preceded human settlement and has not vacated. The Marines at Camp Lejeune were operating on land the Tuscarora considered dangerous for reasons they recorded with specificity. The range safety officer at Fort Hood was sweeping terrain that sits on the eastern edge of what Comanche oral history marks as a corridor. The Cascade foothills around Fort Lewis carry designations in Salish geographic memory that translate, roughly, to territory that is not ours to claim. Most military content gives you tactics, operations, unit histories. This channel goes into the spaces that military content leaves deliberately blank, because the men who serve in those spaces don't stop experiencing things just because the institution has no category for what they experienced. If that's the kind of depth you came here for, subscribe. This is what the channel is built to do. Here is the detail that combat veterans describe most consistently as the most disturbing aspect of these encounters. And it is not the appearance, and it is not the speed, and it is not the vocalization, and it is not the fact that it does not show on thermal. It is the stillness. Every account that involves extended observation, more than 30 seconds of direct contact, includes a moment where the figure simply stops moving and waits, not hiding, not fleeing, waiting. With what multiple Marines have described, using language that suggests they spent time searching for the right word, as patience, a quality of patience that implies an understanding of time that is different from an animal's understanding of time and closer to a strategic understanding. The patience of something that knows you will eventually do something it can use. One recon Marine with 2 combat deployments and 14 years of service, I described it this way. I have been in situations where I was being watched by people who wanted to kill me. I know what that attention feels like. This was not that. This was more like it was waiting to see what kind of thing I was, like it was deciding something about me. That sentence, a thing in the woods, deciding something about you, and running cold, no heat, no signature. Just patience, and the dark and the specific silence that falls when everything else in the forest has already decided to stop moving. There is someone in your life, probably someone who has served or someone who has spent serious time in deep wilderness, who has a story they have never told anyone because they knew no one would take it seriously. Send them this, not as a joke, as a reference point for something they thought they were alone in. What this video could not fully address is the behavioral pattern across these encounters, specifically the escalation sequence that appears in accounts where the contact lasted longer than 5 minutes. There is a next video on this channel that goes directly into that, and if the detail about strategic patience just landed the way it lands on most people who hear it for the first time, that video is not optional. It's the piece that makes this one complete. There is a question this video has now created that is worth sitting with. If the institutional mechanism for suppressing these reports is not malicious but simply practical, if the military has no framework for what these men encountered, then what framework does exist? The answer to that question goes significantly further than this video has gone, and it lives in the territory between behavioral biology, indigenous geographic knowledge, and the specific classification of unexplained contact events that the US Forest Service began quietly cataloguing in 2011. That is the next layer. And it changes what you think you already understand about this one. These men went into those woods trained, armed, and operating in units designed to handle every threat that a hostile environment can produce. They came out unable to file a report that their institution had a category for. That gap between what trained human perception can detect and what official frameworks are willing to acknowledge is not a gap that closes itself. It is a gap that grows, and the woods are very patient. The accounts in this video came from men who spent years deciding whether to speak. But in the comments, tell me this. Have you or someone you know with military or law enforcement background encountered something in a wilderness environment that you have never been able to explain with the frameworks that were available to you? Not what you think it was, what the moment felt like to be inside it. The comments on this video are going to be something else.